Hey there kids, Psycho Dude Horror here, and this is the final part of my tiny town just got put on lockdown. So after I post this, I'm going to make a complete version of this, and then we're going to be working on my tiny town just got put on lockdown, searching for a way out. So if you guys do enjoy this, leave a like and consider subscribing. And let me know what the scariest part of the video was in the comments. And make sure you go support Cryptic Nightmares on Reddit. And go support the original story on Amazon. And let's get into today's story. Stay scary. Day 29, Part 2. We sped down the interstate in the direction of the other cars we had seen past the next small town. Grace had just finished reloading my gun as I drove the streaks of blood trickling down my shirt and into the chair. I was still mostly covered in the spray of viscera from the lurker I had shot on top of me, but cleaning myself off was second in mind behind the need to put a decent amount of distance between us and the horde of creatures that had descended upon the farmhouse we had taken shelter in. "Look!" I shouted, pointing at a sign on the side of the road. Grace looked at it and asked me what I thought it meant. My hope was that it meant that there was other people held up somewhere in the form of a makeshift fortress. However, all the signs that said the word survivors, which left ample room for interpretation. We drove down the road for the next few minutes speculating on what the sign might mean, and as we got closer to the next town, the signs became more frequent. As they became more frequent, I started building suspicion towards them. The fog again became denser the closer we got to the town, which to me meant that there was a higher amount of larger creatures in this town, from what I can tell so far. The creatures are the ones producing the fog, and I thought that more fog would mean more creatures. The next town was slightly bigger than our town, but still small. As we got into the town, I noticed that the road in the town also had Humvees blocking it at one point, but had since been moved and mostly stripped from parts, and from what I can tell. As we slowly crept further into town, we followed the signs that were leading us because we were soon surrounded by abandoned vehicles on the side of the road where it looked though people had gotten out and walked the rest of the way. There were at least 50, if not 100 cars left behind. We parked in the driveway of a house that looked like it had definitely seen better days and sat looking around in silence for a few moments. "Something feels off about this," I said, finally breaking the silence as I turned to Grace. "Yeah, I'm not sure I like this either," she replies. "But you need to clean that stuff off of you. You need to get you bandaged up." I nodded in agreement. We sat for a few more seconds in silence before I broke it again. "I'm gonna search the house real quick. Rinse off in the sink, maybe steal some t-shirts or something to make some bandage out of it. Then I want to inspect whatever is up ahead before we make contact." My focus was on getting cleaned and bandaged up rather than making contact with whatever lay in wait just down the road. I'd hoped that it was something like a school building that had been fortified with lots of survivors and food and protection. But we sat listening to the eerie sizzle of the fog. My mind started wondering to the possibilities of there being more nefarious intentions behind the signs. Grace opened the glove box and set her gun on the dashboard, letting me know that she had realized her part was to wait and protect the kids. Bodhi whined as I opened the door and began to get out. I looked back in the vehicle and tried to decide if I should take the bow to be quiet as possible but suffer the pain in my shoulder each time I drew it back, Or do I take the pistol and know that every time I had to use it would announce loudly exactly where I was? I decided to take the bow, at least for the first step of this plan. Bodie whined again as I turned to leave the vehicle, which caused me to turn back around him to him. "You want to come with me this time, puppy dog?" I said to him. He chuffed in response. "Okay, let's see how you do." "Come on," I said, as I motioned for him to follow. Grace looked at me with worry, knowing that he tended to run off, and I wasn't grabbing his leash. I looked back at her confident that seemed to have a new understanding of all these unusual circumstances. As I crept up to the house, he followed right by my side, head turning, alert for anything that might be off. We walked into the house with ease because the door was already broken. I scanned and searched each room for this single-story ranch before stopping in the kitchen to use the sink to wash all the muck I was covered in. I removed my torn and tattered shirt and half-ass washed it before putting it back on the wet. Bodie sat by the door watching back and forth from me to out into the hall toward the door. Once I was done washing off, I examined my wounds, and just as I expected, they weren't very deep and had already stopped bleeding. I went to the only real bedroom I found in my earlier search of the house, and in the closet I grabbed a couple of shirts to tear into strips and use as makeshift bandages if I needed. Bodie made a soft woof and ran out of the house to the vehicle. I followed him, found him waiting by the door to the SUV. "Good boy," I said to him. "The next part might get crazy, pup, so I think you should stay and protect everyone in the car." He woofed and did a few quick wags of his tail, which I took as him agreeing before opening the door to let him back in. "You look better," Grace said, motioning to the lack of blood and guts covering me. "Yeah, I feel a lot better too. I'm gonna sneak up ahead and see what I can. I'll get to you in a few minutes," I said in a weak attempt to reassure her. "Or you'll be running back to jump into the car to get us the hell out of here, same as before. I know the drill. I love you, be careful," she said. "I love you, Daddy," Daddy yells from the back seat. "I love you too. I'll make it quick," I said, and with that, I shut the door and ducked behind all the cars as I snuck my way down the road. As I got to the end of the road, I saw an old stone church surrounded by a 10-foot tall fence that looked like it had been erected using various parts of different fences from around town. There was a large gate in front of the road, and at the top it was a large chunk of what looked like the tin roofing was the word "Salvation" crudely written on it with a paintbrush and what I hoped was red paint. "Fuck, there's no way this is gonna go well," I muttered under my breath. I tried to stay as hidden as possible as I did a lap around the building searching for an alternate route in, or at least a better view. And after I made a full lap around the building, I looked around and noticed a 2-story house just across the street from the church. That's what I'm talking about, a vantage point. I made my way over to the house. As I snuck inside, I began hearing a strange noise coming from the second floor. It was muffled, but almost sounded like people talking. I found the steps and drew the bow as I began to climb. I made it about halfway up the stairs and realized that it was a voice of a radio calling out to someone who wasn't answering. As I hit the top of the steps, I heard a scream coming from one of the spider creatures, followed by a shot ringing out and glass breaking. Shit, someone is firing wildly at one of the spiders up there, I thought to myself. I began to back down the steps as I thought about finding a different house when I heard from the radio. What's going on out there? Creeper bug got Jim. Don't worry, I got it though. Okay, find someone to take his post, preferably someone who is paying attention, so they don't end up like Jim. Okay. Who should I get to do it? I don't give a damn, Theo. Grab one of the followers and tell them it's what the master commands. Okay, I'll find one. I waited for a few minutes of the radio being silent before I released the tension on my bow and crept the rest of the way upstairs. I found a room with the man who apparently was Jim, lying dead on the floor along with one of the spider creatures in a broken window. His body was covered in blood and lots of chunks missing, which I assumed were bites from the spider. I took the radio off Jim and quickly moved to the side of the window view. I really wish I'd brought the scoped rifle and at least some binoculars. From the edge of the window, I saw the gate open and a tall young man walk toward the house. This must be that sorry son of a bitch that was told to take Jim's post, I thought as he made his way to the door. I quickly set the radio down next to Jim in the middle of the room, slid over to the corner behind the door, and drew my bow. The radio started crackling out. Ben, are you at the post yet? Clearly this new guard's name was Ben. The radio was silent for a few more seconds before repeating. Ben, have you made it upstairs to your post yet? Answer me. I could hear him coming up the stairs and half jog over to the room. He came in the room, and when he got halfway to the radio, I called out to him, revealing that I was there. Hold it right there, Ben, I said, causing him to spin towards me. Listen, I don't want to hurt you. I just want to know what is going on inside that church. My family and I are looking for some refuge. Well, he began stammering and stepping backwards. Sir, safety, he continued, stumbling over his words, still moving backwards step by step. As he stepped back, he rested his heel on the talk button of the radio sitting on the floor. Let's go, Ben. What is it? Is it a commune, a safe haven, survivor colony, a cult, a mass collection of apocalyptic cannibals? What the fuck is in the church, Ben? I shouted at him. He kept glancing at the doorway as he fumbled for words, so I moved over to block it, my bow still trained on him. It's a survival colony. He finally got out. Are you peaceful? Will we be safe here? I shot back at him. Well, you'll need to talk to. I heard a shot ring out, followed by a second and a third coming from the direction I had left Grace and my girls. My grip tightened on my bow as I sneered at Ben. What is going on, Ben? What is that? Spit it out! I yelled. He began again. Just as I took a blow to the back of the head, causing me to release my arrow as I fell to the ground, and everything around me faded to black. The last thing I saw was my arrow hitting Ben right in the base of the throat. He collapsed as well and began to very quickly cover the floor around him in a pool of blood as he bled out. Grace watched as I walked away from him to go back and look ahead at whatever was at the end of the road. At first, they sat in silence as Grace alertedly scanned all around the vehicle. Mommy, I want my tablet, Addie said from the back after about 15 minutes of sitting quietly. What is taking so long? He should be on his way back by now, Grace thought as she handed the tablet to Addie. Just as she thought this, Bodhi began to growl as as he stared out the windshield. Grace turned to see 3 men with guns looking through vehicles as they walked. Bodhi barked at them, and they all turned their attention to the SUV. Gracie quickly got out, and with the gun raised at the closest man, she began yelling, "Who are you? What do you want?" "Oh, don't worry, ma'am. We're just out here looking for survivors," said the first guy. "Where's my husband?" Grace demanded. "Oh, we haven't seen anyone else. Just you," said the third guy, the one Grace had the gun aimed at. The furthest one back snickered and half whispered to the first guy, "Yeah, she will be perfect." "What?" Grace said, realizing that they never said why they were looking for survivors. Just then, Bodhi jumped out of the car and began running at the men, growling. The furthest guy back took a shot at Bodhi, but missed, and Bodhi changed directions, running off behind the houses. The shot taken at Bodhi caused Grace to panic, and she fired 2 shots into the man, one hitting him in the stomach and the other in the chest. As the man slumped to the ground, Grace tried to aim and fire at the second one, but the gun had jammed, and they descended on her with a blow to the back of the head, knocking her out. I awoke groggily and unable to move. As I looked around, my eyes widened with fear as I saw that Grace was tied to the chair next to me. I looked up and noticed that I was tied to a chair as well. We were up front at the church in the main chapel. The rows of pews before us were nearly filled with people. Some were alive, some were not. There was a huge man standing between us, looking out over his flock of the confused, yelling out some sort of sermon that didn't make much sense. The man had long, bloodied robes that had covered red and purple creature blood, staining it. Also fastened to the robe were lots of sharp, black splines from the creatures that he had the head of one of the lurkers hollowed out and mounted on top of his hood that he wore over his head. The mantis-style face needles had been pulled out and set in such a way that the man looked like he had antennae on his head. As he spoke, he gestured to us sitting there, and as he gestured, I noticed his hands were rough and long and very bony. "I have seen the Master, the one who screams inside your mind, and he sleeps. He rests beneath the ground, waiting for our sacrifice, so he can pass us on to the other side, where eternal bliss awaits. And now, my friends, with the discovery of these people, we will have that sacrifice." The roadman yelled out to his disciples as he said these the living ones. The living ones cheered at his words. The smell inside the chapel was putrid. It had been decorated very intricately with various body parts and organs from the different creatures that now plagued the landscape. I nearly retched at the sight of how many of the followers stood and cheered next to the decaying corpses that had been placed in the pews. "Where are my children?" Gracie yelled out as she regained consciousness. "Oh, my little lamb. They are safe. They will be raised as our new generation of followers." He directed the first of his responses to Grace before turning and yelling out to his disciples, "Servants of the Master, slaves of the beast's will." Again, the crowd cheered. A screech suddenly pierced the air coming from outside. It was followed by a gunshot, then several more gunshots, and another screech. And soon, a cacophony of screams and screeches, gunshots began to ring out from all directions. "The time has come, my flock. We must get these sacrifices to the beast," the robed man shouted. As he turned towards us, the ground began to rumble, and the air was filled with a roar from a behemoth. "Holy shit, it followed us," I thought to myself. I struggled to break free as Grace did the same. Neither of us were having much luck. The cacophony of sounds caused me to wince as it began to hurt my ears. The robed cultist priest stepped closer to us, and another robed man came from our sides. They picked up the chairs we were strapped to and began to carry us out the back of the church. A second roar thundered across the sky just before the behemoth trampled in through the front of the church, causing part of the building to collapse. Spiders and lurkers poured in behind it, and the armed guards were picking them off very quickly, but not quick enough. The men carrying us panicked and dropped us at the ground hard, sending pain throughout my body. As Grace hit the ground, her chair broke, giving her movement in her right arm. Still, with the splintered piece of chair strapped to her arm, she quickly tried untying her other hand, followed by her feet. "We praise you, mighty beast. We have sacrifices to your master," the priest yelled at the behemoth as it stepped closer. More and more of the building collapsed with every step the colossal creature made. I watched Grace as she finally got her legs untied. "Good, now me," I yelled to her. "Where are my babies?" Grace yelled just before slamming her wrist into the shoulder of the priest. The jagged and splintered chunk of chair arm she had strapped to her arm pierced his shoulder, disappearing for a second, and came back covered in blood. Rage filled her eyes, and just as she was about to strike again, the behemoth roared again, and she staggered back. Deafening at the short of distance, the ground shook with the roar. The priest slowly turned around, laughing loudly just before he spoke. The behemoth chomped down on him, removing the entire top half of his body. His legs swayed for a moment before falling over. Grace suddenly snapped out of her rage and scrambled to untie me. We both got up and ran for the nearest door in the back as we blasted through it. I looked down the hallway we had just burst into. "Mommy!" I heard Addie yell through tears. I saw someone dragging her by the hand and carrying a car seat with the other. Just then, another roar erupted through the air, from the monolithic beast. The ground shook with the immense volume. Grace and I sprinted down the hall after our children as part of the building began to fall around us. We pushed into the room and running at full tilt, an emaciated woman turned, and I jumped, planting both feet into her chest. She dropped the car seat in Addie's hand, and the impact from the blow slammed her back into a brick wall behind her, and she slumped to the ground, the blow instantly knocking her out or killed her. I'm not sure which, and honestly don't care. Grace grabbed Addie, and I scooped up the car seat with Izzy in it. We ran out of the room and towards what I hoped was the back door. Guns were still firing, meaning that they were either doing some damage or at least keeping the behemoth busy. The screeches and screams of the other creatures had died down, so I was hoping that meant most of them had been eliminated. As we burst through the back door and into the open air, another roar emitted from inside the building. The roar, however, had started sounding weaker, means that the guards were doing damage at least. Close behind us, the beast crashed to the back of the building. As we ran away and back down the road, I heard the 50 cal machine guns had been removed from the Humvees at the edge of town. They sprayed bullets at the giant for a few seconds before I saw a lurker take one of them out. As we ran, a spider came around the corner and jumped at Grace, hitting her in the back and knocking her to the ground. Izzy's car seat bounced and skid on the ground. I spun around as Grace yelled out. Setting Addie down, I ran to Grace and grabbed the spider by the legs, whipped it through the air at the behemoth. Izzy was crying and scared, but completely unhurt, as Grace got up and grabbed the car seat and began to run again. I scooped up Addie, who was crouched by a wall, where I sat her down crying. As we ran, the behemoth sluggishly followed, dragging its steps more and more each time. It let out another gargled roar, and lots of purple blood spewed from its throat. We got to the SUV, and as we loaded the girls inside, we noticed that Bodhi had returned to it and was hiding in the back. I ran to the back of the SUV and grabbed the rifle and a handful of rounds. Loading a few rounds, I crouched near the back of the vehicle and aimed for the eyes of the beast. The rounds of the remaining 50 cal still hitting the beast in the back. Just before I fired, the beast goes to roar again, but instead lets out a gargle as it spews forth more of its own purple blood and collapses to the ground in front of me. I retrained my aim further off into the distance as the 50 cal bullets still fly in the direction of the beast, meaning the guy who was firing it was just blind firing in the direction the massive creature had walked off in. I couldn't see him through the now very dense fog. The fog and the gray haze had become much thicker as more of the creatures released fumes of it as they died. Just then the machine gun stopped as I heard a man screaming from the distance. Something must have gotten him, I thought just as the thought entered my head. The behemoth flared its slits on its neck and released a massive amount of fog into the air. Still not completely sure if the fog had any true effect on us, battered and beaten from nearly a month of all this running and fighting, I turned and got back in the vehicle, and I sped off back out of town as fast as I could manage from the fog. Creatures were still flocking to the town towards the church. We rammed and ran over lots of them as I floated out of town. When we hit the interstate again, the fog seemed to lighten the further we got from the large gathering of creatures. I finally had wished I still had the pistols, at least one of them, but both mine and Grace's were taken from us by the cult, and we didn't get the chance to get them back during our escape. We did find the girls and surprisingly enough Bodhi on our way out, and that's what truly matters. The girls calmed down almost as soon as we hit the interstate. We sat driving in silence, broken only by the sound of the tires on the road, still in shock from the intensity of the day. Without any sort of plan, I drove us west, trying to stay moving as much as possible, stopping only for gas. Day 35. It's been over a month since this all started, and almost a week since we watched the colossal beast fell. The fog was almost completely lifted the further we drove west. I still don't know what started it all, and most of the world around us is far from the way it used to be. Things have calmed way down. I haven't seen any creatures in 2 days now. We stayed at random farmhouses along the way. We just stopped at one for the night. We load a few things into the house for the night. We've been on the lookout for other true survivors, but have yet to find any. This is the new life we live in now. It's lonely and hard, spending every day feeling like you are on the run from something that's no longer around you anymore. The days seem insanely long in the new existence. I almost wish the creatures were still around just for a little conflict from day to day. This being said, we are all safe from that. Has really been nice not needing to deal with all the hassle. There still are so many things I don't know and don't understand. I had so many questions remaining about what had thrust us into this new world. Questions like what had caused it all in the first place? Where is everyone? And did killing the behemoth truly cause it all to end, or did it just happen to coincide with something else that happened around the world? I still never found out what the fog truly did. So many questions remained on my mind. But I guess, like they say, don't look a gift horse, right? Day 56. I woke up this morning again to Addie asking for breakfast as I begin to search the house for something to feed her. Food is getting more and more scarce in the now barren and lonely landscape. I glanced out the window and fear rose in my throat. My hands began to tremble as I called out to Grace. Grace, grab Izzy and get down here quick. As I look out the window in the dim morning light, I can see dew covering the grass, and the day outside is very quiet, except for a quiet, soft sizzle. There's a gray and purple fog starting to roll in. Hey there, kids. Psycho Dude Horror here. Thank you guys so much for listening to tonight's story. I will have a completed version out either tonight or tomorrow. But thank you guys so much for sitting with me and bearing with me through this story. Thank you for allowing me to take this journey with you guys as I literally just jump started into it. So thank you guys very much for sticking with me. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, be sure to leave a like and consider subscribing. And leave a comment, tell me what you thought the scariest part of today's story was. And I will see you guys in the next story. Stay scary. Also, guys, quick thank you to Swift Lifestyles for allowing me to become a partner with them. As now that I am a partner, I have a discount code that you guys can use. So thank you to them for allowing me to become a partner with them. So yeah, if you guys head over to swiftlifestyles.com and use the code HORROR10 in all capitals, so it's capital horror 10 at checkout, and you can get up to 15% off on your order. They sell shakers, supplements, and drink supplements. So thank you again to Swift Lifestyles, and remember, use the code HORROR10 in all capital letters for 15% off on your next purchase, only at Swift Lifestyles. Stay scary.